A handful of intriguing names enter the fray as Guardians managerial candidates. What can we learn from this World Series matchup? All that and more with friend of the show, Travis Sawchik. Or, depending on who you listen to, the best guest we've ever had on this show. I'm so excited to welcome him back. As you will see, no Zach today. He's busy gearing up for, I don't know, some managerial search. Apparently they're getting close here, reportedly. And so I thought it'd be a great time to welcome in a man that has been requested heavily in our own Discord. Travis Sawchik, friend of the show, and you can read him on The Score. Travis, welcome back, buddy. It's truly a pleasure to have you.
Great to be back with you, TJ. And it's good that Zach isn't here because he beat me in our fantasy football matchup this week. So
yeah, so
I don't want to hear about that.
Apparently, Zach had mentioned that you weren't going to be welcome on any future show if you beat him.
Well, I guess it turned out for the best then that Brandon Ayuk didn't come through on Monday Night Football for me.
Apologies for that. Well, I do welcome you back. I'm happy to have you back. We have some great conversations on the show, and I thought it'd be a perfect time to actually have you back with so much happening in the big baseball picture with the World Series and, of course, Guardians zeroing in on their manager. Let's start there with the Guardians and their managerial search because, as I mentioned in the intro, there are a few names here that more than we had gotten previously. I had said, Travis, that this was like the quietest manager search to that point that I had said that, I think, at this point last week. Because we had gotten some names. There was Mendoza, the Yankees bench coach. There was Albernaz, the Giants bullpen coach, and a little bit of rumblings of John McDonald. And that was basically it. And this is coming from a team that had said that they had 45 internal and external candidates to sift through. And I'm thinking, we haven't gotten anything. There's nobody publicly that has been linked to this organization. Other than those handful of names, it kind of got weird to think that way. But now we do have some more names. We have reports of Andy Green lining up for an interview. We have Clayton McCullough, who apparently the first base coach of the Dodgers has gotten some interest. We've even seen Stephen Vogt of the former big league catcher, who, as I was looking into more, it kind of seemed like a very interesting candidate to be a manager, if not in Cleveland, maybe somewhere. And then yesterday, more reports coming out from The Athletic of Craig Counsell potentially being in the mix. So it's gotten a lot more interesting, and I think we're getting close. Maybe even by this point next week, we will know who the Guardians manager is. From your perspective, Travis, what makes for a good manager these days? Because there's so much, it's not the managed by the gut that former managers once did. There's a lot of data. There's a lot of sitting down and having meetings in advance, going over many different scenarios. And I question, how much does a manager actually have his fingers on the individual in-game decisions? How much of that is just him, and how much of that is the collaboration of 20 different people before it ever gets to that point? What do you think is important in a big league manager these days?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it really is, we looking in from the outside and not being part of those meetings, and it's tough to unpack any manager's really involvement in the ultimate decision. They are going to the mound. They are doing that, but how much input do they have pregame? I do think you want a manager who understands. I mean, in the year 2023, you want a manager who appreciates analytics and who understands probability, third time through a lineup, all that good stuff. So I think that is a baseline expectation. But reading a spreadsheet really isn't that difficult. They don't have to be computer scientists. They are getting the information. So I don't know that absorbing it's important, but I think that's sort of a baseline expectation. And I think Rob, like in Philadelphia, I think Rob Thompson has done a really interesting job the last two postseasons, and sort of, it seems to me anyway, that he understands his players well. I was trying to think of the recent with Ranger Suarez. They had decided he wasn't going to go deep into that wild card start, and he was making a decision. Well, should I tell him beforehand, or should I, just surprise him and have him think he's doing his normal outing? And he decided not. He decided not to tell him because he was worried he would pitch differently. Like he would empty the tank. He wouldn't be himself. So Suarez was upset getting pulled, but he pitched well. They ended up, I think it was a shut out 6 combined relievers, helped shut out the Marlins. But it's interesting, even after the game, Ranger told reporters that, yeah, I think it was the right call because I probably would have pitched differently. I would have been trying to empty the tank. Who knows? Maybe he would have been even better emptying the tank early. I don't know, but I thought, the psychology of that decision was interesting. And when Thompson replaced Girardi last year, he decided to do things like he would send the lineup to players the day before games, the night of, so they knew if they're in the lineup and where they were in the lineup, so they weren't. Because when I was a beat writer in Pittsburgh, there were occasions when players would show up, look at the lineup card, and they weren't happy. And I even on occasion saw them go into the manager's office and not be thrilled about it. And you can imagine if you are anxious about your position, having to sleep on it for a night or be worried about it, you're probably not in the best performance mindset. So I think that's a long-winded way of going into that clubhouse, understanding the clubhouse, being a good clubhouse, having a good feel for it. I do think that matters. So in the interview process, or even in just looking at past decisions, I think do managers seem to understand people well, combined with understanding of, yes, if this pitcher should come out before facing a third time, he will execute that, and he will do it. I think they're looking for, and ideally, I think an ex-player always helps because players know, he's been in my shoes, he understands it too. So, I think a Craig Counsell, I don't know how realistic that is, but I think he would check a lot of those boxes, and he has the experience and track record, so that's a little helpful too, and not going with a complete unknown. Whether you could outbid the Mets for anyone, I don't know about that. But
are they just handing him a blank check? You fill it in.
And I do have to think that going back to the clubhouse part, create an environment where people want to show up and work too. Like I do think that's one thing Francona did well in Cleveland is players, at least when I was around the team, they generally seemed happy to it was a good vibe, and it seemed like they had a lot of input in when they were playing and whatnot, maybe too much. But I also think he had some shortfalls, like Game 4 of the Yankee series in the playoffs last year, where Clase doesn't come into the game until they're trailing by 4 runs late. I thought that was a total mismanagement of your best pitchers available that day. So I think there's some areas to improve upon too that they can extract a few more wins next year by just making some better, I think, lineup choices and in-game decisions. So that's my really rambling response to.
We got so much more ramblings to get into. Trust me. I want to get into Counsell in particular. What maybe makes him the most sought after, if not the best manager in baseball? There's a conversation for that. Maybe him and Kevin Cash. They feel like they're neck and neck for who could be the best of maybe at least the new school managers, taking out some of the guys that have been around the game for a very long time. You mentioned the coming into the clubhouse and knowing the lineup aspect, and that was something that Tito talked about years and years ago. In fact, when Brad Mills was the bench coach, they used to sit down every single night and they would bring in different lineups and different ideas, and they would figure out what it is days in advance sometimes. So not only that the regular players knew, but also the bench players could better prepare for a day that they knew that they were going to be in the lineup. Or even if it is a regular that plays a lot, is there some benefit from not only are you getting a day off, but mentally you come in, you've already gotten that few hours in the morning to just better prepare yourself for a full day off. He just always looked at that communication as a positive, and certainly you want to continue that. We had a conversation several weeks ago. Just imagine how much better prepared this Guardians front office is to make this decision, having gone through 11 years of Terry Francona. And they know everything that they've seen it up close. They know what they are seeking in a manager. And so when they go through this process, they have seen exactly what they want. And not that they want another Tito clone, but they can take all of those elements and say, these are the sorts of things that we thought made a huge difference. Are you prepared to do that? Do you agree with doing it this way? And I just feel like compared to the pre-Francona days, or maybe even going back as far as Manny Acta when they were having those interviews many years ago, they have to know so much more about what they crave out of that position, having had Terry Francona in those shoes for so long.
Yeah, that's a great point. they know exactly what worked well there and what they valued, and there's probably some things that they might want to improve on and say in-game decision making, that sort of thing. I don't know, but to your point, yeah, they have a great track record there of what they think works in that pregame preparation, the lineups, managing the clubhouse. So they'll have a better feel of who can, like as to what you said, not a Francona clone, but who can replicate some of those important kind of softer science factors, I guess, and preparing guys and getting the most out of them. Because I do think that matters. And I think any of us in any line of work can relate to being comfortable when you show up to work and being uncomfortable. And I do think that matters. Even like how well are you sleeping the night before you show up, you know? And I think the one other thing is the player development side. Are the managers themselves open-minded to? I think many are today, but are they open-minded to the best practices from training regimens or training technology that get guys ready? The more game-like practice that we see the Texas Rangers doing, and other clubs like San Francisco Giants were renowned for doing it well a few years. Tampa Bay Rays. So, are they going to surround themselves with coaches who are going to employ these practices and get the most out of guys too? Because I think you want to have the right offensive and defensive coordinators around you too, and the best training tools. And I know the Guardians are already well invested in that, but it doesn't hurt to have a like-minded manager who's on top of that every day too, with his staff.
I also like a guy that has enough confidence in himself that he can listen to others, take others' input, and not feel like if somebody has a suggestion, that it's not an indictment on the way that they believe that other person is managing. It's a collaborative atmosphere that this team really thrived in, and at times it got sickening to hear them talk about it being a collaboration as much as they did. But that's really how they came to a decision. And even when it came to like the younger player aspect or the veteran player aspect, I think a lot of people, and we've tried to stress this on the show, it wasn't always just a Terry Francona, no, we're only going with the veterans sort of thing. If the front office felt like we need to play this player, and they said this is something we need to do as an organization, I really believe Terry Francona would take that and likely implement it. So a lot of those decisions, maybe it wasn't always what the front office wanted to do, but there was always an element of the entire team coming to that decision, even if it meant Carlos Gonzalez in the cleanup spot for a team that felt like they were going to compete. So I think it's important to have that in a manager, certainly someone that can collaborate and communicate, as you said. But another thing that the one downside of someone that hasn't been in a position of being a manager before, are they willing to also collaborate but also hold true to what they believe? And I think it's important to come in with, and maybe this is a case with Counsell, because he has a previous track record. He knows and has seen up close what works for him. And I don't want somebody that is just going to sit in that chair and just be a yes man. And front office wants to do this. I worried with Manny Acta that there was too much of that. We're going to do what the front office wants, and I'm never going to push back. Maybe that's unfair. I don't know. Maybe there was some pushback on Manny Acta. But I like someone that is going to challenge the front office at times and make them think about the decisions that they come to. Even if it's like Zach and I will sometimes have conversations and we'll just play devil's advocate because I just want you to defend your point. Tell me why you believe what you believe. And I think it's important to have a manager that is confident in themselves in that way too. That sometimes it is important to have those ideas challenged because it reinforces why are we doing this the way that we are doing it? And sometimes having that outside opinion, it just proves to be beneficial, I think. And that is important. We stressed that when we began this a month ago, talking about what matters in a manager.
Yeah, no, that's another great point. And if you're going with a younger first-time manager, you will run into more of that yes man risk, I think, where they're going to be less willing to state a position that runs contrary to what the senior front office folks want, that sort of thing. So yeah, that's another argument for having a more experienced voice there. And it would be interesting to go from someone with so much managerial experience, former player, and to someone very inexperienced in a first-time role with a team that has, maybe not Dodgers-like expectations, but isn't in a position where they're, not trying to compete next year either. So that's an interesting point. And yeah, I would have loved to have known, like, the Rosario Wars that were played out in the fan base. What were the Rosario Wars like in the meetings? Like, was everyone on board with Rosario playing every day and batting second, or how did Francona, how did he advocate for that? And I guess he's ultimately filling out the lineup card, but how did he win that debate? So that would be really interesting to know how those conversations played out.
Well, it's interesting, Travis, because we always just assume he was always on the side of the veteran. But there were cases, some known, some not known, we haven't even discussed, but there were times where I knew Zack has known that he actually wanted to play or call up a younger player, and he was met with resistance. One of them being Bo Naylor. He wanted Bo Naylor up here weeks before they actually made that call, but they decided, as a collaboration, they wanted to stick with Mike Zunino a little bit longer, give him time. I don't know if it was buying into what a projection before the season began said about playing Zunino over Bo Naylor, whatever the case may be. I never felt like it was a black and white thing. Did Tito have his guys? Yes. Did he play some of them way too much? Yes. Like, we go back to the Mike Aviles playing center field days. Yes, those things definitely happened. But I don't think it was always a case of, no, Tito was always on the side of the veteran and the front office was always on the side of the younger player. I don't think that was always the case.
Yeah, no, I don't want to fall into the veteran manager, veteran player kind of decision-making stereotype. That's interesting. It's just the role of manager is really, I feel like the public and even, we just don't understand its value like we do maybe with an NFL head coach or where he's putting a system out there and you see the play calls and you can even measure the success of that to some degree. There's a lot more, and it's a much smaller sample of games, or MLB has this unique grind to it. There's a lot that goes into it that is immeasurable. And I don't believe we can we can count everything that counts. Not everything that is important is measurable. So I do think some of these, for lack of a better term, like the softer science side of it does matter. How much? I don't know. But it's going to be an interesting search, because I do think it is an attractive place to manage. You have a front office that has a lot of continuity, that had a lot of continuity with a manager that's developed, has a great track record on the pitching development side, and a very healthy, for its market size, a tradition of winning over the last 30 years. So, like with a Counsell, I have no idea, can you outbid the Mets, that sort of thing. But I do think it is an attractive job for whoever ultimately fills it.
Now, the Mets are this completely different animal, because even for many years it was, someone from a big market could always outspend the smaller market, but the Mets have taken it to a new level where they're doing some zany things, and the ownership there doesn't seem to care. Sure, blank check, we don't mind. But the thing that makes this interesting, if it is a bidding war between the Mets and Guardians for Counsell services, let's say, the Guardians, at least for as much as we can point to their payroll and say they're never going to bid for a top free agent, they've been paying Terry Francona like one of the best managers in baseball. It's not like he took a massive pay cut to be here in Cleveland. And so they were already spending in that upper echelon for managers in baseball. That, to me, at least, it makes it more of a tangible thing that I could actually see happening, unless the Mets completely blow it up and decide, no, we're going to go into $10-15 million or something wild for, manager, whatever it is.
Yeah, it's also a different lifestyle choice. Do you want to live in the largest media market and all everything good and bad that comes with managing in New York, or do you want something more like Milwaukee in Cleveland? And in Cleveland, you can always live downtown and ride your scooter into the ballpark too, which you can't. It's not really possible in Milwaukee, I don't think.
What does Counsell take? What does he take to the ballpark?
I assume it's I don't know. Miller Park is strange, or American Life, whatever the name of the facility is now, because it's not far from downtown, but you do have to commute there because it's surrounded by parking lots and off the highway. So I assume he drives a luxury automobile.
I don't know. It strikes me as a razor scooter kind of guy. I don't know. Just see him going down with the wheels that light up as you go faster. I think that could be Craig Counsell.
He could do it here. Yeah, he could do it here.
What do you think about? I had sent Zach the photo. My joke to him was, first glimpse of the potential Guardians managerial staff, and it was the picture of Counsell jumping up in the air with Sandy Alomar walking off the field of Game 7 of the 97 World Series and my much younger self feeling pain as I sent that tweet or that text to him. The dynamic, because we've always just assumed Sandy Alomar is still going to be here. Could we see a staff of Sandy Alomar and Craig Counsell? Could Sandy stomach that, being next to every single day the guy that stomped all over home plate in Game 7? That's kind of painful.
Yeah, I mean, Counsell really owes the city to come back here and end this terrible drought. So yeah, he really, there'd be some sort of there'd be some good karma, maybe reverse karma, something like that, coming back here. And but how much would he change his staff or any? That'll be interesting to follow.
Yeah, the hitting side of things, they just made changes there. Are they going to stick with that, or would he have other ideas? And we're talking like it's a foregone conclusion that he's coming here. It could be any one of these candidates might want to bring in their own people, and you have to listen to that, because, as you said, you want them to be comfortable as well in their workplace and be surrounded by people that they trust, and not only yes men in the dugout as far as the manager. You don't want yes men to be your assistant coaches either. You want pushback and guys that are going to make you think outside the box as well. But I thought it was interesting. You mentioned other sports. That is also part of what makes assessing a manager search difficult for us to talk about, because when the Browns are looking for a coach every 5 minutes, they're looking at offensive coordinators of this team, and you can look at the offense that they ran, right, and think, would that fit in Cleveland? Or you think of a defensive coach and a mentality, does that fit? There's a track record of what that coach does, right? I can't tell you, other than hearing great things about what the Giants are doing behind the scenes to prepare their players, I don't know what the bullpen coach for the San Francisco Giants, their philosophy on anything is, right? Or the bench coach with the Yankees, or a first base coach with the Dodgers. I don't know anything about what their philosophy is. So to some degree, knowing that this front office has gone through 11 years of Terry Francona, because it's boring to just say, I trust them to make the right call, but I do at least trust them. I give them enough of a lifeline here to make that call and assume that they're making the right decision. Because as someone had tweeted me several days ago, who do I want? And I'm not smart enough to know, Travis. I'm not smart enough to be able to decipher and differentiate between any of these candidates.
Yeah, I just, hopefully they don't hire someone with like a sacrifice bunting philosophy. I don't think they'll do that. So at least embrace, the most realistic, the highest probability scoring events and decisions. But yeah, there's less known in these decisions. You don't know their philosophies. I think, it's again, going back to, we don't know how they really manage the clubhouse and those interactions behind closed doors from the middle of February to the end of the season. So I think that matters more in the nature of the game. So there's a lot of just more unknown to it. And I think they'll have a great process. The front office has a bunch of smart and experienced folks in it. But like any decision, there's no 100% certainty that it'll work out. It's probably more like, hopefully they have a 60% success rate or something like that, because we've seen managers with much shorter tenures here that didn't quite work out. So yeah, it is. I couldn't tell you who the best choice is either. But I think you do have to have some level of trust that this leadership group will not make a bad decision.
And sometimes you don't even know that the manager is great until they demonstrate greatness, or they are sort of off the radar and you don't think about them. Yeah, sure, they've been in the minor leagues for a long time managing, but Torey Lovullo, who's that? Oh, he's just the World Series managing guy for the Diamondbacks. It's managing or looking at managers and assessing them. It always comes back to you never are sure how much credit to give them in the positive and how much credit to subtract when things go wrong. I never know how to assess it, and we just look back and we just say, well, who are the best teams? Well, those must be the best managers. I don't know, maybe.
I know. It's like the writer award voting on managers. It's like how do you even begin to accurately assess that question? Because so much of it is out of their control, the roster build, financial constraints. There's so much they don't control compared to other sports. And they're also public relations. They're the only coaches in North America who speak to the media twice a day, essentially, for 6 months. They have to explain all the decisions.
They're the face of the organization. Every decision, they're the face of it, whether they agree with it or not.
And there's some value into how you communicate that. Most Cleveland, Francona managed it really well. Like, I think most of the media really liked him, and most of the fans really liked him, and I think that helps soften bad times and unpopular decisions too at times. So yeah, there's a PR element that doesn't quite exist in other sports too, where NFL coaches, some of them. I mean, imagine Bill Belichick speaking twice a day to the media for 6 months.
Right. Yeah, I imagine that would go real well. He already loves the daily grind of it as it is. So Diamondbacks are in the World Series. It's a shock. No one really expected them to be there. It's certainly not at the beginning of the playoffs. Maybe even going back to the beginning part of the season, though. They were an intriguing team, had some young pieces, had made some interesting trades, and so there was a potential for them to get there. But throughout a lot of the season, they had some good stretches. They also had some really awful stretches, and they were able to finish in a positive enough to make the postseason and then make a lot of noise and get hot when it counted. And it always, when a team like this, a Cinderella story happens, it kind of comes back to the point of just get in. Just get in. It's all that matters, because this postseason, it's just way too random. More than any other sport, there's just way too much randomness that happens in this game. And so I'm wondering where you stand on that. As a team, is it just simply taking we're trying to win 54.5% of the time or whatever it is, and hey, we'll just take our chances? Is it deeper than that? I mean, how do you assess the just get in mentality? Is it really just as basic as that?
I think that's how a lot of teams are operated, and even the Mariners didn't make the playoffs, but Jerry Dipoto, their GM, did take a lot of heat for publicly stating their goal of trying to win 54% of the games. Is essentially never go in too much in any one year, get as many shots at this randomizer machine that is the postseason. And it does make sense. It's also really hard to win 54% of games for 10 years. Like, I looked that up, and there's only 5 teams: Dodgers, Yankees, Astros, Guardians, and it wasn't I can't remember the 5th, but like, that is a high bar to clear. But yeah, I think we're seeing a lot of that. I actually thought the first round buys would incentivize teams to chase those a little more, but I don't think we've really seen that at the last couple trade deadlines too much.
No one wants the buy.
No one wants. And maybe after we saw 300-win teams go down that had those buys, there'll be even less incentive to chase them. But yeah, it does seem like teams are just trying to move to that, just be slightly above average for an extended period. And I think we've heard, Guardians talk about, or a lot of smaller markets talk about sustaining competitiveness. And this was even before the 2 extra wild cards. And it goes to that, the crazy randomness of the postseason. I'm actually writing a piece about this for tomorrow, and I was looking at 1 seeds advance to the Super Bowl like 53% of the time. NBA Finals, it's closer to 58%. And in the World Series, it's 41% wild card era. So you're not seeing the best teams advance as much. And, look, the Diamondbacks, they play better than anyone in October. You look at Carroll and Alec Thomas and Fott and Gabriel Moreno, and they're going to be a really good team for a long time. But and we all love, as Clevelanders, we love Cinderella stories. But if everyone in the dance is like a Cinderella, or after the first round, is it really a Cinderella story at that point?
There's shoes everywhere. How's the prince going to find who this?
Yeah, so I'm a little conflicted, where I do love a good Cinderella story. But then you have a team with a negative run differential in the regular season playing for a World Series championship. Does anyone really believe they're the best team of 2023? I don't know. So I'm a little
Or does that matter? Right.
Or does it even matter? It is ultimately an entertainment business, and they're just trying to draw people in. And the expanded playoff format has done a lot of good things. Like, it keeps more fan bases engaged later in the season, and everyone loves a good playoff series. More people are watching this time of year than any other. And in a sport without a salary cap and floor, it is arguably the biggest parity driver, having more teams in the field. So,
well, I find it interesting because as a extreme baseball fan, and maybe not that casual person that they're after, I'm so much more invested in a Texas-Arizona World Series than I would have been Astros-Dodgers again. But yet the Astros-Dodgers, maybe it would have brought more casual eyeballs, maybe it would have stole more segments on SportsCenter. What's more important? Is it to put on a good show? Because I think because these two teams are so very different between Texas and the Diamondbacks, it can make for some very interesting games and I think some fun elements of this. Would that have been better to have that, or the matchup we've seen a lot, but there are some talented players here, and the teams are probably overall better. What's more important? Do you cater to the fans that are always there, but they're going to be even more invested now because it's fresh blood? We're interested. This is new teams. It's a new playoffs, new baseball this year. What is truly important?
Yeah, the ratings, I'm sure, will not be good for this, but amongst people that really love baseball and follow it, the variety is probably good to see different teams. To your point, I mean, I've seen, like, my old boss Nate Silver was kind of trashing this matchup, and yeah, so and he wants the playoffs to contract, and there's certainly some people, that feel that way. But yeah,
just make it college football. There's 6 teams that can win it.
A bowl system. There should just be a bowl system.
That's it.
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, we always complain about, it's Red Sox Yankees Sunday night baseball every night, and it's Astros in the ALCS every year. The one team immune from being disrupted in the postseason generally. And then we get this variety, and then some of us complain about that too. So we're just never going to be happy. Maybe it is, I don't know. I feel like it's almost 2 different seasons. The regular season values, there really isn't parity in the regular season. We kind of, by the end of the 6-month marathon, the best teams are usually, those with 95 plus wins. And just like the best players, their performance over that long haul, we know who they are. And then we have the second season, which roster construction is part of it. Like the Phillies, I think, really were built better for postseason play than regular season, when you can shed those weakest starting pitchers and that sort of thing. And then just the element of if your best stretches, it really is 2 different things. And I guess I'm just wrestling with, is it okay to put all the value in October or most of it? Or should we treat these 2 different seasons differently? So that's what I'm kind of conflicted with. On one hand, I like the variety. On the other hand, when people are like praising it as parody, I feel like it feels a little manufactured. Like, well, of course you're going to have parody when each series is like a coin flip and the game is so much different than how it's played in the regular season. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's what I'm kind of conflicted with.
It does, but also the sport lends itself to more randomness. And just as we were talking about it, I'm wondering, compared to the NFL, if you're having a team that wins 13 or 14 regular season games, and then you have another one that wins 9 or 10, surely one game, maybe it goes either way, but still the odds still favor the team that's much, much better. And I'm wondering, is the difference between like the upper tier teams in the NFL and the teams that are in the middle, could that be greater in certain seasons than a team like in baseball, when you're looking at 26 different players on the field? One player could be great. Like basketball, LeBron James steps on the court, definitely got a chance to win that game because you got LeBron James no matter what he's surrounded by. But in baseball, Mike Trout is not having tons of postseason success. Shohei Ohtani is amazing, but he's not single-handedly lifting the Angels to the postseason when he's healthy. And so I'm wondering, is there just less that separates the top upper echelon teams in baseball from like an 80-whatever win Diamondbacks team, and that lends itself to some, not only that, but 7 games, pretty much anything can happen between these 2 teams.
Yeah, certainly the nature of the games is so different. I mean, and Patrick Mahomes was taking every snap in a playoff game or regular season game, essentially, and LeBron James's usage isn't going to be that different in the playoffs, regular season, but it's not just that Bryce Harper can only bat once every 9 times. It's also that Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola combined for 28% of regular season innings for the Phillies, and then in the playoffs it's 50%. So the games are different, and that it's more of a coin flip in baseball. And then certain teams are built better for a game that changes. I think to your point, it's like we never complain when there's an NFL upset. Everyone is generally like kind of enthusiastic about it, like, oh, that was crazy, I think it's because the sports don't really change. It is Mahomes. It is less of a coin flip. It feels like a true upset. Where in baseball's playoff, I think it's a little bit, well, yeah, anyone can win a small series. So, I mean, that's, I think it goes back to that Cinderella point I'm trying to make. It feels a little less upsetty because it is just a giant randomizer machine, less so than the other playoff formats, just because of the nature of the sport, as you articulated, with Ohtani and Trout only having limited impact. And so I'm very conflicted about all this. It's especially as someone who grew up, always rooting for underdogs.
Yeah.
I do. And yeah, you want to give every fan base some element of hope. And I do think the expanded playoff, you're looking at teams that each lost more than 100 games 2 years ago, and now they're in the World Series. And I think that is a good thing. If you're a fan in Pittsburgh, you're a fan in,
right.
Kansas City or wherever. So that's a lot of like, on this hand and then on the other hand, sentiment. But that's how I feel. I don't really know how to feel about this. So maybe I'm just going to enjoy it.
Yeah, we don't have to think too much into it.
Yeah.
It's not our job to figure that out. It's our job to enjoy it and explain it and maybe realize some of that enthusiasm. And I'm not saying I have the answer as far as like, no, it's definitely because the upper echelon teams are closer to the middle. I don't know. I'm just asking the question, but I'm thinking about who are the MVP candidates every year. It's the guys that are like up around 6 wins, 7 wins maybe, wins above replacement. And what's a league average player? Like 2.5. So we're talking about 4, maybe 5 wins separating those two tiers of players. I got to imagine it's a lot different in the NFL. Patrick Mahomes, what does he do for your team compared to a league average starting quarterback? It probably limits them significantly just by that one player. So it's definitely different sports, and you and I are not going to sit here and come up with all the answers. But it's funny we talk about these two teams being underdog Cinderellas. We are talking about the Texas Rangers that spent like $55 billion, right, a couple of off seasons ago, and just completely remade their whole middle infield. So this just means every team now takes the road where they just sign a bunch of free agents now, right? That we're back into that category. Is that what we've learned from the Texas Rangers?
Oh yeah. Every market is going to be totally spending $300 million on that. I mean, I do think the Rangers, I did write about this earlier this week, like what can we learn from either of these teams, if anything, or what could MLB teams learn from these roster constructions? And I mean, just to the point about the 54% mark, like I think the Simeon, Seager, Evaldi signings and, had DeGrom worked out for a team that's trying to go from below average to slightly below or slightly above, they make the most impact there. Like these signings would have, the Dodgers could have done this and they win 100 and they go from 108 to 116 wins and they still lose the first. But if you're moving the needle from slightly below to slightly above average, I think that's where the Rangers model makes some sense, and the Phillies too. Like, okay, yeah, these impact guys can provide a huge swing in our outcome. And a few wins here can gets us into the playoff. And then, as we know, anything can happen where, I'm sure the Dodgers are going to try to get Ohtani and he'll help their chances too, but he'll make less impact there on postseason outcomes than if he's going to a team that, is expected to win 48% of games and they add Ohtani, which I guess is sort of what the Angels were trying to do. And it just didn't quite work out there.
That's a different animal. They're cursed there or something. I don't know.
But there's also just limited amount of star impact free agents too. So even if everyone was willing to throw significant dollars, there's only so many impact players. And
true.
They also, and we have to look at, it didn't work out for the Mets. They did the same thing. The Padres, the Angels. It doesn't work out for everyone.
We only pay attention to the teams where we can take something away from them. We ignore everybody else.
Free agency is fraud. I mean, there's so much risk, and you're paying for generally players in decline years. Although I do think some of the new, like what the Rangers have done with their, the foam balls and the $15,000 pitching machine, and Marcus Semien talking about how it's helped. He had never done this before in his career, and it's helped him prepare for fastballs pregame. He's not worried about hurting his wrists against 100-mile, game balls coming up because he's hitting a foam ball. It can't be hurt. So some of these end up better replicating, as most teams do now, that the starting pitcher they're going to face with, the new age pitching machines that replicate pitch movement and release point. So I wonder if that can help some of these players perform, can warp the aging curve a little bit. And maybe the Rangers have enjoyed some of that. But I know DeGrom's hurt, but Rangers and Phillies last year and almost this year, they hit on, like, part of it is maybe good luck, part of it's evaluation, but they you don't usually see all these free agent signings work out so well. Usually it's a lot more hit or miss. So the short answer is, I think, can we learn anything from the Rangers? If you're at the margins, go get that star player, but it's still really risky.
Man,
The safer approach is still to really be the Diamondbacks. Try to get this more homegrown core. Get a Corbin Carroll, go get a Moreno,
Sure.
and then supplement around them. So
Sure.
that's a timeless lesson. Be a homegrown core.
Just go get those sorts of players.
get
What's the
those
problem?
guys.
What's
Yeah.
the problem?
Go get those guys.
It's like the Guardians looking at a team that can't get pitching. It's like, what's the issue? Just develop it yourself. It's fine. What's happening? Why do you have to pay a premium in the trade market when you could just build it yourself?
So I think, we always want to, who can be what can we learn from these teams? Are there any lessons to extract? I know I'm guilty of that. But I just don't know that there really are this year. I do think the Rangers have a really good hitting plan, but a lot of teams are trying to do that too. Maybe the answer is they're just sit back and enjoy it, because there's really not much we can learn from these teams.
Antonetti, what's your game plan this offseason? We're just going to enjoy it. I don't know. We're just going to see if we can enjoy what we're doing. We don't have any answers. I think we try to fool ourselves, Travis, into thinking we can figure out this formula. We'll get it out. We'll figure it out. Even if it's, as you're talking about, with aging players or pitching injuries, we tell ourselves in the draft that we can do a better job of projecting these players because it makes us sleep better at night, to think that we understand this, because there's something truly frightening about the reality here. We don't know shit. We don't know anything. That's the reality. We don't know anything.
Yeah, we really don't, because Adolis Garcia was traded for cash, and then he was designated for assignment by the Rangers, and no one claimed him.
I'm so glad you brought him up. How many young players? I thought of Oscar Gonzalez with Cleveland. How many young players that have all of these flaws are going to get a second, a third, a fourth shot because they're saying, well, what if he's the next Garcia?
Yeah.
What if he's the next guy that's going to blossom at the age of 28, 29, 30 years old and have his superstar breakout season at the age of 30? We might miss on that guy, so we got to keep giving these guys chances.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Maybe he'll be he'll have some impact on decision making. And I keep seeing people retweet the Cardinals official Twitter account. We've traded all these trades. I'm like, man, no one's gonna make any trades now because they don't want to be the Cardinals. They're afraid of these things. I don't know why the Cardinals specifically are getting this treatment, but it's been merciless. I keep seeing.
Well, they've given away so many guys that have had so many great
the Cardinals
postseason
Zack Allen.
moments.
Yeah, maybe they do deserve it, but people are going to be terrified to make. And I did look at volume of trades made, and Mozeliak is near the bottom. I do wonder if some of these had made him more gun shy, which is
right.
I'm going on a tangent, but. If you're looking at roster builds, it's you miss on these deals, and you're gonna face a lot of backlash. So I do think one thing that is also timeless is in the postseason, and this is sort of a Cleveland discussion 2.0, is power play. You have to have power. It's a strikeout environment. It's hard to string singles together, and strikeouts only increase in the postseason. Postseason, as we know, is the quality of teams and pitchers are generally better, and bullpen work share goes up. So, I think Phillies have shown us that. The Rangers have shown us that. I mean, Diamondbacks not maybe as much, but
But it's also
yeah,
a difficult thing because it's not just having power, but it's getting the power at the right time. Because there's a lot of teams that lose in the postseason that also have great power because they just had their power outage at the wrong time.
yeah,
It's part of like the crapshoot. Yeah, you got to have the good power and you got to be able to hit some bombs. But you got to pray that you're the team that's hitting them at the right time.
I mean, ideally, you're a well-balanced offense that can do all
Sure.
sorts of things. And that is a bit like a good three-point shooting team going cold in one March Madness game. But yeah, you still, it's another probability thing where, yeah, you want to have that in your favor. The other thing, I guess at risk of going off on another tangent, is, Ron Darling made this point, and I've thought about this too, like in the macro environment of the regular season, yeah, never bunt, always play for the biggest thing possible. But I find myself in these like game sevens, you got a runner on second with nobody out, or runner like, and you have a lower like a 7, 8, 9 hitter up, like, yeah, just bunt. Like, I can't believe I'm saying this. Just so, and he's like, these micro level decisions, the psychology changes, and that one run versus no runs is so much more important in that frame. And it's
Right.
I know I'm going against optimum probability of scoring chances, but I even find my own.
But that's looking at bigger
change.
picture, right?
Yeah.
That's over 162 games. You'll end up more right if you don't bunt. But in
Right.
a one game situation, there's a human element here. How much better do you play? How much worse do you play when you're playing from behind as opposed to ahead, or something we don't know? I don't know how to quantify it, but does playing with a lead early help you? There are plenty of
And-
instances where it
yeah.
doesn't, but overall, big picture, could it help you?
The
I'm with you.
psychology
I'm with
impact
you.
is interesting.
I'm at least more than I was years ago willing to listen to some old school ideas, not because, oh, well, that's just what they always did, but I wonder if there's some element still that we don't fully capture in those very small windows that we're talking about.
Yeah, and to bring it back to the manager search, like how would you handle this situation? How should we play this? Like what is because like in Toronto with a more inexperienced manager, it seemed like the decision to pull Barrios that didn't go over well at the club, or it just didn't seem like it was communicated well and that sort of thing. And it wasn't explained well. I don't know. So how are you handling situations like playing small ball in the micro environment versus the macro? These are all things you want to have a good feel on. And the psychology, like I felt like the Diamondbacks, again, there's no way to prove this, but I felt like the pressure somehow, even though the Phillies were a wild card, it felt like the pressure kind of swung on them once they fell behind early in that game. Again, no way to prove any of this. It just kind of feels that way.
Well, hey, this is fun.
Yeah.
But to talk about things you can't prove, Zach and I talk all the time about how baseball, that we have gotten so much better at figuring out who the best players are, how to quantify their total value, and that's great. If we're trying to make a trade with another team or assessing a trade, fine. But you know what used to be a lot of fun? Sitting together at a table in high school, we'd sit around and have these debates. No, I think Manny Ramirez was greater. No, I think Jim Thome was greater. And now we just go, well, let's pull up the Fangraphs WAR. Here's the answer. Okay, on to the next thing. That's not fun. There should be some debate and some unknown here, because that's what adds to the conversation and allows us to have totally fun shows.
Just a couple analytics dorks sitting around talking about the gut feel.
The gut feel.
Yeah, but if it's only analytics, then the manager role isn't really that useful, because anyone can read a spreadsheet and here's go over to pregame situations. This is when you pull your starter. These are when you should lift certain hitters against late game bullpen matchups. I mean, that really, you can write that down on a iPad or take it out to the dugout and just follow the instructions.
Exactly.
So I do think the gray area actually matters. Maybe it seems counterintuitive, but because the science of boiling down player value and splits and performance matchups is so black and white now, or more so than it used to be, that gray area does matter quite a bit, I think.
Well, it's still a game played by humans, and until it's a game played by robots, which with the way AI is replacing all of us, it might be pretty soon. But until that moment, then I think there is going to be some element of that gray area you're talking about. Not all bunts are created equal, just like these shows. Not every show is equal, and this one was definitely one of my favorites, one of our best. Always the case when we welcome Travis Sawchik. How can people find your stuff? What are you working on? What might we find over the next few days?
Yeah, you can find me at the Score app, which, even if you don't really want to read my stuff, it is a great scoreboard browsing. NFL Sundays, playoff box scores. Yeah, it's a great user experience. So go check out the app. Download the app, the Score app.
Oh,
Thanks for having me. It was great to be with you, man.
I enjoy this. We definitely need to make this more of a regular than once every year thing. But we'll figure out. It'll all be based on how you fare against Zach in your fantasy football.
Got to keep
matchup.
losing to Zach.
Later, everyone. See ya.